Can Chelsea fans trust Enzo Maresca? To start off with, who is Enzo Maresca? And in the chaos of the post Abramovich Chelsea era, Enzo Maresca's appointment felt less like a headline grabber and more like a statement of intent from the sporting directors. It was about stability through structure and not stardust. A disciple of Pep Guardiola, Maresca carries the intellectual sheen of modern football, where he's obsessed with control, tempo, and chess like manipulation of space. But Chelsea fans, whom we've grown accustomed to and who associate themselves with speed, pace, power, physicality, aggression, and emotion, now have to contend with the question: can control feel like an identity? Whenever I begin to tell the story of Chelsea, it almost feels like I need to give context upon context. But I want to start, first of all, with a comparison with Pochettino, because what Pochettino in itself presented was a man or a coach who was emotional and adaptive. And this was off the back of a cry for experience or pedigree within the managerial seats at Chelsea. Remember that after the loss of Thomas Tuchel, the song that the sporting directors and the owner had been singing about Chelsea was that they wanted to bring stability in the club through slow progress, through investing in potential and allowing them to get together and build a team that was solid, that was likely to dominate for years. This was not just with the players, but also with the coach, where the example of the Dodgers in baseball in the USA was given. And therefore, after the sacking of Maresca, we saw the appointment of Graham Potter. We saw the interim appointment of Frank Lampard. And ultimately, what the Pochettino appointment did was signal that maybe the sporting directors and the owners were listening and that this time they were going for pedigree. But then also, we do know the kind of football that Pochettino also plays is very emotional, chaotic football. And these were some of the things that we loved, even when we didn't agree with the man personally. Comparatively, Maresca is far more methodological, that word, and positional. His teams aim to suffocate chaos and not dance with it. So he wants repeatable patterns, not one moment of inspiration. And whether you find that reassuring or dull depends hugely on your footballing philosophy. And I can say for a lot of fans, there's a lot of difference. Cool. So, what happens when positional play meets risk management? What Maresca seeks to do, because he seeks to do a lot of things, but one of the key things or key highlights of his play is the inverting of fullbacks. So we see Caicedo dropping centrally from right back position to allow Chelsea to flood the midfield and create a mixed midfield box of four. And I must say, this is one of the things which you saw Pochettino do close to the end of his tenure, which makes it quite surprising because, like, when Enzo Maresca came, we saw like a continuance of this, even though there was some basic difference, right? But then also with Maresca, you see patient build up from the back, where it is designed to lure teams in and then exploit the space behind them. And I have some things to observe with this also, because one of the things that the fans had been saying about them was that they like to play the ball around and not like you use speed to counter. I'll be talking about this. Also, another attribute of his teams was press resistance, which is almost non-negotiable. That's why all of his players need to be good on the ball. And he builds the systems around these players who can receive the ball under pressure and then recycle possession effectively. And he says, we don't rush. So we've seen many instances of him trying to calm down the team, even to the boos and the groans of the crowd. But let's look at it thematically. What has he done? It has almost been a season of two halves. If you look at our current league position, we are fifth compared to uh, when we were like 12. I don't know at this stage. They are just about a few games to go, but I, I remember that it was only in the last days that we ascended up the table. The points difference of +18 versus at the same stage of the season, there's been an improvement in the goal difference. We've seen a lot of big wins, which just wasn't coming under Pochettino. We've seen also like has been able to handle small teams. I mean, it is quite disputable on some of these things, but like in the first half of the season, all of these things which I said were true. Identity and execution, you've seen that his team shows way better structure, where we've seen that our average possession has simply increased, our passing sequences has gone up, our pressing intensity has is ranked third, which is effectively really good. But the problem that a lot of people find with this is that they find this lifeless, right? That possession doesn't mean that you are actively playing go football or that you are going to win. So we've seen that in some games the shots on targets that we have or the shots we get within the overall game is much less because we are taking far more caution and we are less likely going to spam shots at the goal. So you look at some of the games against Nottingham Forest in a 1-0 win against Bournemouth, and some of these things highlight themselves. The next thing I'll be talking about also is the kind of challenges and the frictions and the frustrations. And this is where I'll be going far deeper into some of the sentiments which Chelsea fans have been expressing. First of all, the fan disconnect. Maresca's philosophy has not been universally accepted or loved by everyone. Let's be frank with it. From the very moment that the sporting director said this was the kind of football that we were going to play, the fans were opposed to it. And let's also not forget that this is not the first time that Chelsea has gone for such an approach. We saw Mauricio Sarri's team where they were more of positional, interchangeable play. And there were lots of times that we saw the crowds boo at him several times. So there's a fan culture versus the control culture which is trying to impose. These Chelsea fans are used to fast, direct, and aggressive football and aggressive wing play and drama. So the slow build up and the positional rigidity sometimes feel like this is not a Chelsea and therefore immediately creates that disconnect. Secondly, and this is a bit dramatic, but I think we are all suffering from a bit of the post-Poch trauma, right? And last season was erratic. A lot of highs and a lot of lows, probably more lows than Chelsea fans will care about. We were craving for a bit more emotional connection. Remember that all of the stars that the fans had gotten used to, and I keep using we interchangeably because I am a Chelsea fan. I've made it quite clear on the show. Um, a very non-biased Chelsea fan, able to give uh, like on point, balanced opinions. But let's move on. We wanted a bit more connection with the players because we had seen almost all of the players that we'd fallen in love with leave the club. And when a lot of new players come into the club, it is not that you do not like the players or you do not believe in their ability, but you've not had moments with them. You've not had the chance to build a relationship with them. So that obviously is going to take time. So it was harder to give the team grace, especially after the way that season went. There were almost no heroes apart from one or two of them, and we'll talk about the biggest one of them very soon. And you see that Maresca is not that kind of coach that we saw maybe under Poch, who seems to hack the players a lot and try and build that emotional connection, a steady connection with the fans. He's been more of, I want to focus on the football, and if the football works, everybody's going to love me. So when you watch Chelsea, people feel like you are watching a coach trying to solve a math problem instead of trying to score goals. And this is something that you heard some of the fans saying. Now, to talk about one of the players who turned up last season, one of the players who was able to give us moments for the fans to connect to and then begin to build that identity, Cole Palmer. And he's a brilliant and phenomenal player. We're going to have a lot of time to talk about him. But he was key to us being able to secure Conference League football. I think it was technically Europa League football, but we know what Manchester United always does. And he had a very good season at a good tournament at the Euros. Coming into the new season, and he was already sparkling, scoring 4 goals against Brighton. So he exploded very, very early in the season. I think we saw in the first 12 games that he scored 8 goals and 5 assists. In the next 10 games, he now has 1 goal, 1 assist. What happened to Cole Palmer? And there are a lot of reasons that you can give to that. There's the first one I just want to point out, which sometimes I don't think is very, very obvious to Chelsea fans, is that this guy almost had no preseason and he came into the season injured. So he mentioned it himself, like when he had quite a relatively slower start to the season, he mentioned it that he had been carrying an injury. And obviously, Chelsea made a lot of efforts to reduce the load on him, but it does catch up with you. Like you can be whoever you are, you can be the best at what you do, but it does get to a point where even if it's not an injury, it's the tiredness, it is the fatigue, it is finding the will and the zeal to push yourself again. That's catch up with you. I think the second reason why he also began to struggle was people pointed out to this that Cole Palmer was not given the level of freedom that he used to have under Pochettino. I think that people make this inference, and I've seen people try and point to the stats to show that because of the strict positional play, Palmer in himself is quite restricted in the amount of places he could go on the pitch where he could pick the ball up from, and even in terms of things that he could do. Because the manager prefers that you do not hold on to the ball for too long, that you move the ball around a bit more compared to last season where uh, we could use Kopama's vision and his trickery and his speed to be able to pick teams apart when we are breaking forth on the counter. I think Maresca has come out to respond to this and say that Cole Palmer still has a lot of freedom on the pitch, and I can attest to that. I know when we talk about the box midfielders, we always say him being on the left or the right has an influence in the way in which he plays, but we still do see him picking balls all along the pitch. I think that a lot of the injuries which has happened to some of the attacking players might have somehow influenced where he's had to play or where he's had to pick up more load, because then you have to find him driving a lot from the right or things like that. But that being said, that level of strict positionality may have also limited the amount of opportunities which he's had. But the next thing, which I think is also very important but has not been picked up, is that teams have begun to double up on him. So we rely on him a lot for the creation of our chances. And if you attack him and if you double up on him, triple up on him, and you limit his effect on the game, then you are going to limit the amount of chances and opportunities which he would create and eventually the team would get. And this is not new. I made reference to Sarri Ball. This happened with Sarri Ball. We had a season, we had a period where we just couldn't play. The performances were not coming, the results were not coming. And the reason was because teams now put their strikers and some of the attacking midfielders on Jorginho, who was our creator, who was the one who was conducting affairs from the midfield. So we had teams literally sitting on him, making sure that they reduce the number of touches. And it was almost mathematical. Immediately the touches were reduced, our offensive capabilities reduced immediately. And we saw a similar thing with Cole Palmer when teams began to double team him. The goals have eventually dried up. So all of these things does not help in terms of how Maresca's era in itself has been perceived. Against low blocks, right? The next thing I wanted to talk about was his performance against low blocks. I think that this issue let's be very, very frank, it's been there even from Tuchel, where it seems we struggle to break teams down for whatever reason. So this low block syndrome, as it's come to know, has still persisted throughout Maresca's era, and it's one of the problems that we're looking to solve. So you see the games against Forest, against Fulham, and I'm not calling these teams small, but these are teams who like to sit back and like to hit us on the counter. It's a bit surprising because in the beginning he had a lot of luck against most of these teams, but you would see that the characteristics of the teams show when we began to show more dominance on the ball. And the problem here is that Maresca insists on control and structure, sometimes at the expense of chaos and unpredictability, which may be the key to unlocking or to breaking some of these low blocks. So if you allow them to get back into position with the hopes of being able to play them out or play through, it is far more difficult compared to when you are also able to catch them on the break or be a bit more direct in your play, and exploit the spaces when their defenses are a bit unsettled. But how many times have we seen them charging with the ball only to turn it back and play it all the way to Sanchez to recycle possession? I think we are getting a bit used to it now. I'll be very honest. I am getting a bit used to it now. I even expect them to go. I don't expect them to make quick counters. Compared to a team like, say, Barcelona, who are the exact opposite. They are front footed. If they have one player there, you think, okay, take your time, wait for the others to arrive. But no, they'll start the attack with just two players because they trust their players to be able to beat the men one on one and things like that. Obviously, both sides have their advantage. I'm not here to go into that, but just to point this out. So we miss the vintage Hazard, the Diego Costa, that randomness when Drogba could pull the ball out of nowhere, like smash some of these teams and come up with moments in some of these games. I think that was sorely missing. Another thing I wanted to touch on, because this was also quite surprising, when Poch was given 2 years, I think all the Chelsea fans understood then that, okay, if this is becoming a problem, we can go away, right? But even though the Maresca appointment feels like a gamble, it had a level of permanence to it with the 5 years plus one option contract, right? It had a level of permanence, which meant that if it goes well, probably if the guy is good, then probably we're in a good place. But if it's not, then we know that the likelihood of him being sacked is very, very, very little. And I think it put a lot of Chelsea fans under pressure and a lot of paranoia. And the question isn't just about Maresca, but it's about Chelsea's overall identity crisis and the owner's philosophy. One, they are hedging on a long-term bet. So there is a desire for a project coach rather than someone who would lead us to a trophy. I think the trade-off is quite clear for the club hierarchy. And if you're a fan and you've not noticed this, then I'm sorry for you. The club has made a clear trade-off between instant success and long-term stability. So if we can get instant success, sure. And I think that every team will try and get it. But I don't think that they would maximize resources in doing so. And it's been clear in the way in which uh, they've handled the club. It's been clear in the second point around youth development. We've seen that there's been more investment in the academy, more investment also in buying a lot of young players. And I just wanted to talk about that bit a bit because one thing and when I have time, and let me know in the comment section if you want me to make an extensive video on the Chelsea project itself, because the Chelsea project has a broad vision, right? But the overall strategy and the overall strategy is clear, but the tactics and the means by which they reach this consistently changes. So there was a lot of desire at the beginning to buy high profile youngsters or players. So players who were just outperforming or had their name out there or were buzzing, we were buying them. So that's where players like Mudrik come from. Players who were shining in their academies, yeah. But in more recent years, or especially under Maresca, there is clear intentionality to also build up from the academy. And we've seen significant investment in the academy, significant efforts in tying down some of these academy players to good contracts, making sure that the ones who are good stay. Because I think they go all around the world looking for the best young players and realize that they have a chunk of them at home. So we saw 16-year-old Reggie Walsh debuting in a European semi-final. These are the things we used to talk about with Lamine Yamal, and I think we should positively be celebrating that. And Maresca has bought fully into the academy pipeline, giving 8 debuts this season, which is shown that he will risk development over the short-term wins, something that Pochettino hesitated because Pochettino clearly didn't have the patience. He knew he had a very short term contract and he needed to deliver. And I think that was also one of the problems, which maybe we'll get to highlight later, because you expect him to trust young players, but you just give him a 2 years contract. It wasn't going to work. But on the other side, we've seen Maresca pick up a lot for this, and the tactical structure, a clear tactical structure for the young squad, where I think they see his structure as sort of a scaffolding for a very young team to mature into. So, like we have a lot, more than half of the team is under 22. So this is a team that probably needs rules, needs repetition, needs rhythm, and that's why they feel that Maresca is the man for them. Now, where has he succeeded? Where hasn't he? And this is where we are going to go into uh, the nitty gritties of the work that he's done. So first of all, I think his tactical mastery is on a different level, right? And this was very clear at the start of the season. He knew, and he knows how to profile teams, and he knows how to play against them. And I think one of the misconceptions, in my opinion, is that he plays the same way. It's not true. Like, he has the same principles, but he plays in different ways. And I don't know if it's a matter of the communication, because people seem to have the impression that he has one style of football. Yes, there's a lot of positional rigidity, but for example, against uh, Nottingham Forest, I think at home, when Cucurella came up with the header, he mentioned that Nottingham Forest had been conceding from that position and from those kind of crosses, and therefore, if you cross more over there, statistically you can get there. I mean, football fans know that statistics don't always pan out on the field, but for me, it gives me the right idea that Maresca knows how to profile teams. He's mentioned several times in press conferences that he watches the games. Not that other coaches do not watch, but his emphasis on having to watch them multiple times is shows you that he knows how to profile teams and how to beat them. Most of the time, even when we lose, like how we lost against Liverpool at Anfield, you could see that he has the number on them, and it's mostly just about the execution or taking the right decisions in some places. Saw what he did to Tottenham. We saw what he did to Aston Villa, where it was an almost flawless display of positional football. We neutralized Aston Villa's strong midfield. We exploited the wide areas. We controlled possession. Another thing I wanted to talk about was his player development. Um, After his rough patch, and this is very key for me, because the truth is that Cole Palmer was going to go through a rough patch one way or another at any point in time, but it is about how you handle it. And I think after his rough patch, you can see the man that has come out of it in the game against Liverpool. And you need a coach who is by his side, showing him the right things to do and continuing to fill him with confidence. We saw Moises Caicedo when he came on for his debut, where he gifted a penalty. Under Pochettino, I think he began to improve. Banda Maresca, this guy is a different player. I think Maresca has brought out the best Moises Caicedo. This is not even what we got from Brighton. This is way better than what we got from Brighton. A player like Badiashile, he was struggling with confidence. People don't remember after his injury, but now he's massively improved. I know he's not featured in and out, but every time he's been in the squad, he's been super solid, especially in the way in which he plays on the ball. The youth revolution is something that I think you cannot discount Maresca on. And he did mention this when I think in one of the games where the fans were booing, you realize that they put a lot of young players on the pitch, and it was to signal. I think they were trying to signal to Chelsea fans that, look, this is what you have. This is yours. This is one of yours. And this is what we are building, right? So it's not about booing the team, but it's about getting behind the team. So the youth revolution is quite clear. We've given significant minutes to Chelsea's young prospects and shown faith in their development. And it's almost a cultural shift, right? So the next part to discuss is where he hasn't lived up to expectation. What are the frustrations and the failures and the tactical shortcomings? I think I've addressed some of these things already, but I'll try to go into the nitty gritty over here. First is the small team conundrum. He seemed to have logged it, right? But now that teams intentionally sit deep throughout the game, we've seen Maresca's side struggle to find a solution. And it's the constant emphasis on a controlled build-up, which sometimes makes it very difficult to be able to break through some of these low blocks. So Chelsea sometimes forced into very lateral passing and long range shots rather than creative ball progression. Yeah. And we've won just 4 out of the 10 games against teams placed 15th or lower, showing that we are struggling to break down defensive minded sides. And we need to find solutions for this quickly. I would say that I don't put all of this on Maresca though. We can still point to the fact that the controlled football gives us some difficulty in doing that. But like I said, this is a problem we have been facing right from Thomas Tuchel's season after the Champions League, even with Pochettino. And I think it has to do with teams in the Premier League defending really, really well. They do it very, very, very well. Not only that, if you're playing positional football, the goal is to be able to control the passes through them. And you have to be really, really good at it. See how long it took Man City to build that ability. So, positional football is one that requires repetitiveness and you to know where you're standing and what to do in most of those situations. And you not expect that in a couple of months, players would know how to execute that flawlessly. Second is the defensive gaps. So, because of his use of the inverted fullbacks, which I know a lot of Chelsea fans hate, and I think it's because of the fact that we have some of the best right backs in the league. I myself, I think he has to find a way. He has to find a way to utilize the right backs. I understand where Maresca is coming from. I understand where it's coming from. He says that these are defenders, and if you get them to overlap, it means that you get them far out on the wing where they need to cross in order to be effective. One, when this is intercepted or when you are counter attacked, your fullback has to make the journey all the way back, which means that there is a defensive liability. So the journey going back is way longer. Not only that, shots from way out on the wing is less effective, right? It requires more numbers in the box, it requires more power, and you're even more likely going to lose that. So for him, when the fullback inverts, that gives a shorter space for recovery anytime you are hit on the counter attack, which I think makes a lot of sense. We've even seen some of these fullbacks play in a 10 position like Cucurella and Malogusto has done. Problem is that the fullbacks we have are some of the best crossers, some of the best touchline tacticians, and sometimes placing them in the midfield feels like a square peg in a round hole, which makes probably makes sense why our best team is Caicedo at the right back inverting into midfield, because it does look like for Maresca's system you have to be more of a midfielder than a right back in order to succeed, because when you are defending, you probably when you are defending in the four or in the right back position probably have a lot more numbers behind rather than compared to when you sort of have to go forward and all of that stuff. You get what I mean? Cool. Next is also our pressing vulnerabilities. I think that our system is predicated on high pressing, and we sometimes struggle to execute it efficiently, especially when Jackson was out. And that's why when Jackson was out and Chelsea fans were complaining, I said, "What did you expect? What did you think? Our entire game is built on the nine pressing two people at once. It's pressing for two people and winning the ball very, very high and putting pressure on them and turning it over. Without Jackson, there was no way we are going to execute it. And we saw much progress when once Pedro Neto began to take this role on and play within the nine. But another complaint we've had about Maresca is the lack of adaptation in big losses. Uh, Sometimes you see that we can play a certain kind of game in order to win. So I remember the game against Manchester City. Manchester City was very, very vulnerable at the Etihad, and I understand that they had beat us in the beginning of the season, and they are still Man City. But it did look like if all the teams were beating them on the counter attack, but Maresca insisted on possession football, and guess what? City now engaged the route 1 process, where they just play the long balls. Both of their 2 goals they did that and they won the game. So um that lack of adaptation has proven to be a problem and a point of frustration for the fans. But last, and I think I've spoken a bit about fan engagement, but just to go a bit into it, I think that his personality comes off as someone who doesn't care about the emotional side of things. It comes off as a bit robotic, which Chelsea fans do not enjoy. Chelsea fans want to enjoy our players. We want to enjoy our coaches. So we like coaches who tell us stories, who inspire us, who motivate us. That's why Thomas Tuchel will sit in our hearts forever. He seems a bit robotic, and you do not feel that he's making the effort to try and connect to the fans. I think in more recent times, he's done way better in terms of referencing the fans in media engagement. But he used to, even when he was winning, he said, well, if we win, we'll get them behind us. I don't need to go there and be clapping towards them and things like that. But also, sometimes on the pitch, we've seen fans boo, and he takes the fans on in press conferences and insists that this is the way he's going to play, nothing is going to change. And if you don't want this kind of football, then get him out of the club. Sometimes that's not always a wise idea. And I think his interaction with the media, apart from it being robotic, it comes off as a bit sharp, which in some ways can be viewed as radical honesty. But I think he needs to. There's a bit of a cultural difference over here, because the English press plays respectability politics, or we engage in political correctness. So that bluntness doesn't always come off very well, especially when the media later has to carry it. Because sometimes I understand that he's saying the truth, but it doesn't go down well with us. Like when he said we're not ready to challenge for the title. We know, we all know, and we all knew it. Let's be honest, right? But we all thought, just not that you should lie to us, but encourage the team and get them where you think they can go. That's all that we're looking for. But he was bloody realistic and just said we were not ready for the title. And truly, we were not. But we refused to accept it. He was right, but we refused to accept it. This is a classical case of it's about how you say it and not what the content of the matter in itself is. Okay. Now, the question: can we trust Maresca? Should we stick with him moving forward? I think I have a couple of reasons for us to believe. One, the tactical identity he has instilled. I think it's not about the effectiveness of it, because the effectiveness of it is something we are going to see over time. But the fact that now we do have a sense of identity and tactical clarity, something that we've lacked for so many years. Remember, we almost signed Guardiola at a point, and everyone just said, "Look at how Man City plays. That could have been us." I think that could have been us moments now, and it shows in the way in which we play that we have a clear identity. It's fluid, possession heavy. Have seen people post clips of Sarri and say, "Oh my God, why did we let Sarri go?" Because this could have been it. We could have been the next Man City, right? So just the existence of that clear tactical identity, for me, is one of the reasons to believe it's a foundation that we can grow on. Just like it's been shown, that's the identity we want to have. We brought in Potter, it didn't work. Now we've brought in Maresca. I don't think it ends here, but I think that it is good that at least we are choosing a style and going with it. Secondly, his youth integration. I think his ability to manage and develop youth talent is a fantastic asset, especially because we also love Cobham, or the Chelsea fans love Cobham. And Chelsea's future hinges on its youth system. And Maresca has already shown that he will prioritize that path over quick fixes from external signings. How many times, as Chelsea fans, haven't we complained about exceptional talent that we've just let go? Talk about the Salahs, the KDBs, and even the less ignored ones like the Gahys, like the Lewis Hall, like Tomoris, who go on to have fantastic careers. How many times have we not? It's not even about these are the best players in the world, but they are good enough to play for Chelsea, but just never get the opportunity to go into the team. And we end up spending loads and loads of money on talents which come in and who just don't deliver. we saw under that short stint with Lampard what the youth can do. And I think the future is in the youth. Even from a financial perspective, where buying players is now very, very expensive, we need to have the capacity to develop our own players. And he's shown that he will give them opportunity, he will give them minutes, and he can develop them. Okay. So I think that uh, that is something that can give us a lot of hope. Three, big game performances. I think in some of the most difficult fixtures, because I won't lie, now we may look at playing West Ham and say, oh, that's cool. But we used to struggle West Ham away. Um, Tottenham, we've never struggled. That's Tottenham, we've never struggled. But I think in some of the big games, he's really turned up. Even when we've lost, even games against Liverpool where we lost, games against Arsenal where we lost 1-0, you could still see that we turned up. Let's not forget that Chelsea was losing 5-0 to Arsenal just a couple of seasons back. We were having very, very horrible results. We lost 6-0 to Man City just a couple of years back. And we still do lose under Maresca, and we've lost a couple of times. But I think our biggest loss is probably Ipswich with the 2-0 win. Someone can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But he's turned up in some big games, and he's made us a proper team. So some of these big game performances give me the clear indication that his ideas will come into fruition even as he is growing. And I think there's room to adapt. And with tactical rigidity is a problem, obviously, but Maresca in himself as a coach is still evolving. He always had his principles, but he's just managed Leicester for one season, I think Parma, and then the Manchester City Academy. But like we saw what he did with Cole Palmer, where he adapted his role in recent weeks, allowing him to be a bit more free flowing now again, which shows that he's not rigid. Sometimes I remember when I'm saying I remember a lot. But when Jackson was out, there was calls to put Pedro Neto center forward, and he did it. Almost every call that we think, okay, this is too rigid, you need to do this, he almost adapts. He stopped playing Gusto in the 10, which means he's trying new things. And once he keeps doing that, he's going to find a version of the system for which we can really, really unlock teams. But now I want to move on to the reasons why probably we should doubt, right? And the first is the tactical rigidity. So if he sticks to this style and he continues to remain stubborn, I think in theory you can have nice styles and tactics, but it's also about the results. So if this leads to stagnation, especially against smaller teams, and he can't break down low blocks, we can't win the league because most teams will play low block against us. It's quite clear. You need to learn how to beat it. Arsenal has unlocked it now. Manchester City unlocked it. Liverpool has unlocked it. The big teams need to learn how to play against those low blocks. Secondly, I think sometimes some of his adjustments have been inconsistent. Some of the tactical changes which he's made sometimes calls to question, especially within games, some of the team selections. But if I don't think it's something that would continue, I think it's something that he might be able to learn with experience. Lastly, the pressure and the mentality. I think that's the biggest thing for a lot of Chelsea fans. We want to see a manager who is driven. In the last couple of weeks, we've seen a Maresca who is a bit more daring, a bit more willing to make dreamy statements, a bit, I don't say less practical, but doesn't hammer too much on the practical, makes extensive efforts to try and engage uh, with the fans, saying that we want to win the Conference League, saying that we want to be in the Champions League. I think where a lot of fans turned on him was when he began to talk about us not winning the title, that he was not here to win the top four. Like, my brother, what? So what are you here to do? You can't come and joke with our lives over here. Like, we are very much invested in this. What are you here to do? You are not here to fight for top four Champions League. You are not here to win any trophy. And we've been invested in this team. He didn't gauge the temperature of the fans. So if such rhetoric goes on, where it doesn't seem like he's very hungry for trophies, then I think that it's going to create a lot of doubt for us going with the team. So now, is there a future to build over here, or this is a false dawn? Is this um highlights of some? Is this the best that we're going to see? Is this the best that we're going to get? For me, his tenure has been marked by the existence of a clear direction. Maybe the results have been mixed. And for me, that clarity for me is the most important thing, because results sometimes depend on a lot of things which can be outside of your control. But when it's clear that this is what we are doing, then we have that template for which we can be able to improve. And he has delivered a lot of progress in key areas like the tactical cohesion, player development, and some of the big game performances. However, we are not like the small team syndrome. Chelsea fans do not feel like this. Um, uh, do not feel like they're a big club if they are not able to take down like most of the small teams. They want to be able to maul over them, right? Some of the defensive frailties and the occasional tactical inflexibility are still major areas of concern. The leadership has shown immense trust in Maresca by giving him a long-term contract. But whatever that trust is justified. If that trust is only justified or depending on his ability to fix some of the cracks in the foundation and also to adapt to the pressures of modern football. I think if it comes to the question of whether Chelsea should should stick with Maresca, I think the answer depends on whether the board believes that the tactical evolution will bring sustained success, or if immediate results should take precedence. Maresca's philosophy may be the right one for the future, but the challenges of the present definitely cannot be ignored. I think that the board has shown their hand in that instance, but whether this appointment continues or they change it will give us a clear indication of what they've decided to do. And for me, I don't think this precludes them from making any changes, but I think Chelsea fans should stop hoping, in my humble opinion, that the change in itself is going to be drastic. I think we will most likely continue on this direction, maybe with small adjustments in the way in which we can be able to balance us staying competitive and winning titles for with pursuing long-term growth. All right. Thank you all so much for joining me today on this episode. Really lovely to have you over here talking about Enzo Maresca and whether Chelsea fans should trust him moving forward or not. As usual, please leave your comments in the comment section. I really, really love to hear your opinions. And also, please do subscribe to the podcast and help us make more. Thank you all. Have a good weekend. See you.